Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's case, we have the story of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement arresting more than 90 people as part of a fake university that they created in order to find people that were engaged in fraudulent misrepresentation to the government. So we're going to read a little bit about the news story that covers this, and then we're also going to read some of the criminal indictment that was recently unsealed in this matter, which covers some of this stuff and details a little bit more about what was going on. So let's get started with this. So first of all, we see the logo for the University of Farmington. This university does not exist. We see the logo and name. It does not exist. It is a fictitious university created by ICE as part of their scheme. So that is their logo and that is their name. So let's read on. About 90 foreign students of a fake university in Metro Detroit created by Department of Homeland Security have been arrested in recent months. A total of 250 students have now been arrested since January on immigration violations by ICE as part of a sting operation by federal agents who enticed foreign-born students, mostly from India, to attend the school and market itself as offering graduate programs in technology and computer studies. I love the way that this is reported, by the way. You're going to see, because I've read the indictment, I didn't read the story, but the way this story is written and the way the indictment is very differently. This all makes it seem like, Homeland Security is just being a bunch of bastards and trying to get these people, right? But if you read the indictment, it is highly the other way around. So let's try to figure out for ourselves what's actually happening. So I just take note of the way this is written. The government says it's not that. So the students had arrived legally in the United States on student visas, but since the University of Farmington was later revealed to be a creation of federal agents, they lost their immigration status after it was shut down in January. Out of approximately 250 students that were arrested on administrative charges, nearly 80% were granted voluntary departure. Of the remaining 20%, some were granted a final order removal, some of them were ordered to be removed, and others were given an expedited removal. The remaining 10% have either filed for some sort of relief or are contesting the removal. ICE has stated that in March, 161 students have been arrested, which has now been increased to 250. Meanwhile, 7 of 8 recruiters who are criminally charged with trying to recruit students have pled guilty and have been sentenced in Detroit, including Prez Ramina last week. The last one remaining has been sentenced in January. So as we just learned, these individuals have pled guilty, so there's no judgment from this because there was part of a plea, but we can read the original indictment against these people who have since been convicted by their guilty plea and learn what the United States government says has happened. So this is the actual indictment from the United States of America versus Bathroth Kardidi et al. So let's read on. The defendants, a group of foreign citizens, acted in concert with each other and others, assisted at least 600 other foreign individuals who illegally remain, re-enter, and work in the United States, and actively recruited them to enroll in a fraudulent school as part of a pay-to-stay scheme. Because of the recruiting success, this alliance collectively profited at least $250,000. A foreign citizen who wishes to enter and remain in order to pursue college must obtain an F1 non-immigrant visa. The non-immigrant F1 visa does not itself create a direct path to citizenship, nor does it immediately allow a foreign citizen student to work lawfully in the United States. However, a foreign citizen student who obtains an offer of employment with a United States company willing to sponsor the student may be eligible for an H-1B visa. With that predicate out of the way, let's see what happened in this specific case. From on or about February 2017 to January 2019, undercover agents from Homeland Security posed as owners and employees of Farmington University, which was located in Farmington Hills, Michigan. The university was part of federal law enforcement and undercover operations designed to identify recruiters and entities engaged in immigration fraud. The university was not staffed with individual instructors or educators. It had no curriculum, had no actual classes, nor any educational activities being conducted therein. Rather, the university was being used by foreign citizens as a pay-to-stay scheme, which allowed these individuals to stay in the United States as a result of foreign citizens falsely asserting they are full-time students. Each of the foreign citizens who enrolled and made tuition payments to the university knew they would not attend any actual classes, earn any credits or make any academic progress towards any actual degree in a particular field of study, a pay-to-stay scheme. Each student knew the university's program was not approved by the Department of Homeland Security, was illegal, and the discretion should be used in discussing the program with others. So here we see a difference in the facts according to the United States government versus the narrative that has been generally discussed along this case in the public eye. In public stories regarding this, it has been mostly labeled as a tragedy to these students, that these students did nothing wrong, that the federal government fooled them all, and they were brought here by the federal government under false pretenses as part of some sort of trap in order to entice them to boost ICE's and Department of Homeland Security's numbers or something like that. So most stories on this have put this as the students as the victim of a scheme from Department of Homeland Security gone wrong. However, according to the United States government's indictment in this matter, the Department of Homeland Security was engaged in this, and the recruiters and every student knew for a fact that it was a fraudulent scheme, that no actual classes were occurring, that no actual education was occurring, that no actual process was going, that even though they were paying tuition and said that they were attending classes, that every single student knew for a fact that this was just part of a pay-to-stay scheme, that every single student knew they were engaged in fraudulent misrepresentation to the government, and that this was in fact a fake university. So the narrative from the United States government is far different from the narrative from the general public on this issue. According to the United States government, every single individual knew that they were engaged in a scheme to defraud the government, that they had student visas, but all of them knew they were not here to engage in actual studies. They were here only under the pretense of being students under a pay-to-stay scheme. So that's a bit of a difference in the narrative between the United States government's telling the story and the generally accepted narrative, I would say. You know, the United States government does a lot of questionable things at times, but U.S. attorneys, and this was filed by a U.S. attorneys generally like pretty upset. You know, I know a lot of U.S. attorneys. I don't know many bad. In fact, I'm hard pressed to think of like a bad U.S. You know, bad law enforcement, even federal law enforcement is one thing, but like bad U.S. attorneys, I'm hard pressed. Not saying that they don't exist, because that would be ludicrous, but you know, I'm assuming that if the U.S. attorney is saying this, that they believe it, and they believe it based on evidence in the case file. So like, yeah, and this is an indictment, so you wouldn't expect the evidence to be here, right? You wouldn't expect it to be part of the indictment. So, you know, all we have to take is the U.S. attorney's word for it. But, you know, at least for me, I find it pretty credible. You know, I mean, the U.S. attorney is usually like pretty solid. I mean, maybe it's my bias in a lot of different ways, but like, you know, I've done enough stories here shitting on police and shitting on things that I think, you know, that like, I just don't always take the government's word for it. Like, you know, it's not like I'm like overtly biased to just, you know, say, well, the government must be telling. I cover enough stuff where we're shitting on the government too. But here I'm inclined to take the U.S. government's word for it. I'm inclined to say, well, it's probably true. You know, maybe that's my bias, but that's kind of where I'm sitting. The defendants herein were recruiters and profited from the pay-to-stay scheme. In exchange for cash, kickbacks, scholarships, and tuition credits, the defendants enlisted hundreds of foreign citizens to enroll at the university. The defendants, in furtherance of the fraud scheme, conspired with foreign students to fraudulently maintain their non-immigrant status as students. From on or about February 2017 up to and including the date of the indictment in the Eastern District of Michigan, the defendants did knowingly and intentionally conspire and agree with each other as follows. To knowingly or knowingly cause another to possess, obtain, accept, or receive a certificate of eligibility for non-immigrant student status, also known as Form I-20. And to knowingly or recklessly disregard the fact of an alien remains in the United States in violation of law, conceal, harbor, or shield from detection such alien in any place for the purpose of commercial gain or private financial gain in violation of law. SEMA telephoned an HSI undercover agent regarding enrolling in the university without attending classes in order to fraudulently maintain his immigration status. SEMA further requested a tuition reduction for bringing students at the university. Kendall telephoned an undercover agent regarding enrolling in the university without attending classes in order to fraudulently maintain his immigration status. Kakakrady telephoned an agent regarding enrolling at the university without attending classes in order to fraudulently maintain his immigration status. Takalapathlal telephoned an HSI undercover agent regarding enrolling in a university without attending classes. Hardeki came to the university and collected $5,000 for recruiting students. Takalapali emailed an HSI undercover agent his bank account information so that he could collect $5,000 for recruiting students. Sam and Kendall met with an HSI undercover agent to collect $20,000 for recruiting students. Sama came to the university and collected $20,000 for recruiting students. Sama emailed an HSI undercover agent his bank account information so Sama could collect $9,000 for recruiting students. Rampisa telephoned an HSI undercover agent regarding enrolling in the university knowing it was pay-to-stay scheme. Rampasa also discussed his business relationship with Sama, including the number of students he recruited at the university. So that is the end of the case of the United States of America versus Rathith Haridi et al. In this case, we learned the United States government opened up a fake university as a honeypot. They did it to find people who were illegally recruiting students on a pay-to-stay scheme. So they would illegally recruit people, bring them over here on a student visa, but according to the government at least, all the people knew that there were no actual education classes. So the government is alleging at least that all these people were engaged in a scheme of immigration fraud as part of fake immigration. And so these people here were illegally immigrating. Knew it. So we've seen a difference in the popular reporting on this issue. We see a difference in the government's reporting on this issue. And I leave it up to you to decide which is more credible. At least in my opinion, I find that most U.S. attorneys, in fact, the vast majority, are very upright kind of people. We've discussed enough on this channel of people behaving badly in government to know that people can behave badly. But at least for me, most U.S. attorneys, vast majority, are pretty upstanding people. So at least as far as this indictment goes, I tend to believe it on its face that, this roughly represents reality. And so that's my bias perhaps, but I'll leave it to you to decide what you think happened